Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajak Acharya Ashtadrisha Shishman His Divangrishla A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the Simul devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Simul devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Simul devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 1. Shri Shuka Uvacha Atma Mayam Rite Rajan Parasyanubhavatmanaha Na Gathitartha Sambandha Swapna Drashtur Evanjasa. Shri Shuko Vacha Atma Mayamriti Rajan Parasyanu Bhavatmanaha Nagati Tarti Sambandha Swapna Drashtur Evanjasa. Shri Shuka Uvacha Atma Mayamriti Rajan Parasyanu Bhavatmanaha Nagati Tarta Sambandha Swapna Drashtur Evanjasa. Shri Shuko Vacha Atma Mayamriti Rajan Parasyanu Bhavatmanaha Nagati Tarta Sambandha Swapna Drashtur Evanjasa. Please repeat.
Swapnadrashtu ivam jasa. Shri Shuka Uvacha. Atma Mayamrite Rajan. Parasyanubhavatmanaha. Naghate Tartha Sambandha. Swapna Drashturivanjasa. Shri Shuka Uvacha.
Parasanubhavatmanaha Nagatinartha Sambandha Swapna Drashtorivanjasa. Shri Shukovacha Atma Mayamrite Rajan Parasyanubhavatmanaha Nagati Artha Sambandha Swapna Drashtorivanjasa. Shri Shukovacha. Can you give me some water? Can I get some water? No. Let's get a water. Mataji's? The chant. Shri Shukovacha Atma Mayamriti Rajan Parasyanu Nagate Artha Sambandha Swapna Drashtori Vanjasa. Shri Shukovacha Atma Mayamriti Rajan Parasyanu Bhavatmanaha Nagati Artha Sambandha Swapna Drashtori Vanjasa. Shri Shukovacha Atma Mayamriti Rajan Parasyanu Bhavatmanaha Nagati Artha Sambandha Swapna Drashtori Vanjasa. Shri Shukovacha. Shri Shukadev Goswami said, Atma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mayam, energy, Rite, without, Rajan, O king, Parasya, of the pure soul, Anubhava Atmanaha, of the purely conscious, Na, never, Khateta, it can so happen, Artha, meaning, Sambandha, relation with the material body, Swapna, dream, Drashtuhu, of the seer, Eva, like, Anjasa, completely. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, O king, unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there's no meaning to the relationship of the pure soul and pure consciousness with the material body. That relationship is just like a dreamer seeing his own body working. Purport. Maharaj Parikshit's question as to how the living entity began his material life, although he is apart from the material body and mind, is perfectly answered. The spirit soul is distinct from the material conception of life, but he is absorbed in such a material conception because of being influenced by the external energy of the Lord, called Atma Maya. This has already been explained in the first canto in connection with Vyasadev's realization of the Supreme Lord and his external energy. The external energy is controlled by the Lord, and the living entities are controlled by the external energy, by the will of the Lord. Therefore, although the living entity is purely conscious in his pure state, he is subordinate to the will of the Lord and being influenced by the external energy of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, also the same thing is confirmed. The Lord is present within the heart of every living entity, and all the living entities' consciousness and forgetfulness are influenced by the Lord. Now, the next question automatically made will be why the Lord influences the living entity to such consciousness and forgetfulness. The answer is that the Lord clearly wishes that every living entity be in his pure consciousness as a part and parcel of the Lord, and thus be engaged in the loving service of the Lord as he is constitutionally made. But because the living entity is partially independent also, he may not be willing to serve the Lord, but may try to become as independent as the Lord is. All the non-devotee living entities are desirous of becoming equally as powerful as the Lord, although they are not fit to become so. The living entities are illusioned by the will of the Lord because they wanted to become like him, like a person who thinks of becoming a king without possessing the necessary qualification. When the living entity desires to become the Lord himself, he is put in a condition of dreaming that he is a king. Therefore, the first sinful will of the living entity is to become the Lord, and the consequent will of the Lord is that the living entity forget his factual life and thus dream of the land of utopia where he may become one like the Lord. The child cries to have the moon from the mother, and the mother gives the child a mirror to satisfy the crying and disturbing child with the reflection of the moon. Similarly, the crying child of the Lord is given over to the reflection, the material world, to lord it over as karmi, and to give this up in frustration to become one with the Lord. Both these stages are dreaming illusions only. There is no necessity of tracing out the history of when the living entity desired this. But the fact is that as soon as he desired it, he was put under the control of Atma Maya by the direction of the Lord. Therefore, the living entity and his material condition is dreaming falsely that this is mine and this is I. The dream is that the conditioned soul thinks of his material body as I, or falsely thinks that he is the Lord, and that everything in connection with that material body is mine. Thus, only in dream does the misconception of I and mine persist life after life. This continues life after life as long as the living entity is not purely conscious of his identity as the subordinate part and parcel of the Lord. In his pure consciousness, however, there is no such misconceived dream. And in that pure conscious state, the living entity does not forget that he is never the Lord, but that he is eternally the servitor of the Lord and transcendent to love. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taprakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishtamamshta Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savaduktam Parajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shivashakan Vidamshta. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu, Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranama Mahare Pre, Vanchakapatu Vyashta Kripasandu Bhyevacha, Patita Nam Pavane Bhyo Vaishnami Bhyo Namo Namaha, Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putalesh Mati Bhakti Vakasa Swami Iti Namane, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putalesh Mati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Bisharne, Nirvashesha Shunyavari Pashtati Edition, Tarne, Buddha Mahadbir Yimafbor, Vibor Nirmaya Shitted, Amusha Purashabung, Digunan Shudasha Shudashatmaka, Sonang Krishista Bhagavan Vachamsi Me. Shri Shukadev Goswami said, O king, unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no meaning to the relationship of the pure soul and pure consciousness with the material body. That relationship is just like a dreamer seeing his own body working. So this is the Shukadeva Goswami answering Maharaj Parikshit's first question that he asked in the last chapter. So actually, I gave a class on that question, and I more or less touched on this answer incidentally. So Srila Prabhupada has a long explanation here. Well, I'll just try and skim over what's going on here. So Srila Prabhupada is explaining the Lord's Atma Maya, and he says this is already being explained in the first canto in connection with Vyasadev's realization of the Supreme Lord with his external energy. So Vyasadeva, who compiled this book, he had a vision. He entered samadhi, a trance, mystic trance, and in that trance he saw Krishna himself, and behind Krishna, in the background, he saw Krishna's external illusory energy. Krishna standing distinct from his illusory energy. In other words, where there's Krishna, there's no Maya, simply put. And Vyasadeva saw this very clearly. That's what Srila Prabhupada is referring to here. And Srila Prabhupada continues to this point that although the living entity is purely conscious in this pure state, he is subordinate to the will of the Lord and being influenced by the external energy. And then he says the next question, why is the living entity under the external energy? He gives a long 2 paragraphs explaining it. But the essence is that the living entity wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna. We've talked about all of this before. And then Srila Prabhupada says, therefore the living entity in his material condition is dreaming falsely that this is mine and this is I. The dream is that the conditioned soul thinks of his material body as I, or falsely thinks that he's the Lord and that everything in connection with the material body is mine. And in the verse itself, Shukadeva Goswami, he says that this connection, this illusion is just like a dream. This misidentification of the spiritual soul with his material body is just like a dreamer seeing events in a dream and seeing his own body work in a dream, rather, and mistaking those things to be real. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada will explain, the Bhagavatam explains, there's the night dream. We have dreams at night, swapna, that's the word here in this verse, and there's also the daydream. There's conventionally 3 states of consciousness, although spiritually there's 4. There's the waking state, which we're all familiar with, the dreaming state, which we're also familiar with. Then there's the deep state of deep sleep, which we may not be so familiar with because the mind and senses retract from their objects. And the waking state, our gross senses are active, and our subtle mind is active. So therefore, we can hear, we can smell, we can perceive things, and we can also think and act with our intelligence. When we're sleeping, it appears like we're doing the same things, but the gross senses aren't active. Everything is taking place on the mental platform. The subtle senses are active. And in the state of deep sleep, neither the gross mind nor the the gross senses nor the subtle mind is active. Everything is just withdrawn, and the soul more or less, as stated in the 11th canto, it more or less merges into a state of ignorance, is what it is. But it's a facsimile of moksha, liberation. It's similar to the state of liberation, the Bhagavatam explains, and it's because of that the living entities in the material world, they think sleep is something very nice. Even though when you go to sleep, you're harassed by so many different dreams and illusions. Why would you think it would be pleasurable? But that pleasure is coming from that state of deep sleep. And actually, if you sleep and you don't actually get to the state of deep sleep, that state of deep sleep is what refreshes us when we wake up. We're able to go about our activities because we enter that state of deep sleep. Srila Prabhupada will explain, maybe it's stated in the Bhagavatam as well, I'm not sure, that for one who has many dreams when he sleeps, he doesn't get good rest. He becomes very disturbed because he's in the state of dreaming, not in the state of deep sleep. So the state of deep sleep, the workings of karma, more or less, they're still going on in the background, of course, but the living entity returns to a facsimile of his own nature. Meaning the gross material body isn't manifest, and the material mind isn't manifest. And he enjoys a perverted sense of happiness, something akin to liberation, as I've said, but it's not permanent. And anyway, finishing this point. So therefore, the living entities, they look for pleasure in sleep. This is what they're looking for. You see people, they become very depressed. People who suffer from depression or other illnesses, they'll tend to sleep a lot. So their attraction for sleep isn't necessarily to the dreaming state, it's because they want to, more or less they're looking to Shunyavad philosophy actually. They're looking to escape, basically. They want to escape into the state of deep sleep. Because ultimately, that's what the living entity is looking for. He's looking for liberation or relief from material miseries. In the waking state, they do so out of ignorance. They try to live, the conditioned living entity does so. He looks for means through his gross senses. If he's a little more intelligent, he does so through his mind. In the sleeping state, he looks through his mind. But actually, that relief comes in the state of deep sleep. But, of course, this state of deep sleep is not permanent, and actually it's... although it's akin to liberation, the living entity is still covered by a veil of illusion. So the Paramatma within the living entity's heart, as stated in the third canto, I think, he wakes up the living entity from the state of deep sleep and again puts him back into the state of waking existence. In this way, the living entity rotates through the three states of consciousness. Although it's stated in the Bhagavatam, and also you see it in the Upanishads, is very prominent, that there's a fourth state of consciousness. Well, first, there's the three states of consciousness, is pointed out. So the states of consciousness is changing. So just like this word is coming here, swapna drashtur, in the Sanskrit itself. So the witness of dreams. So the living entity is passing through waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, but he's drashtuhu. He's the witness of these states. Most people, karmis, they misidentify, the basic fault is that they misidentify the field of activity to be the self. They misidentify the activities of the dream to be themselves. And the example is given here in the verse. It's just like a dreaming man. This relationship is just like a dreamer seeing his own body working. So we all have experience, unless we're very elevated souls, that we go to sleep every night, we may be in Krishna consciousness, but immediately we misidentify with the events of the dream. It's something very basic, but even though it may be ridiculous, most of us have experience, we may awake from a dream and realize that the dream is completely ridiculous. Or even within the dream, we may become conscious or sober and realize, this doesn't make any sense, I'm dreaming. But the nature, the illusory energy is so strong, this Atma Maya, is Krishna's energy. So even though it makes no sense, it can still overpower the conditioned soul. It's just as Arjuna asks Krishna, or Uddhava asks Krishna in a more direct way, how is it that the living entity acts against his own self-interest and acts just like a ass or a dog? And Krishna answers, more or less, it's due to the influence of the modes of material nature. Even though the living entity, he has some sense of intelligence and can act like that, the illusory energy, because it's Krishna's, he can overpower any material asset of the living entity. So this relationship is just like that, a dreamer seeing his own body working. But those who are intelligent, they come to realize that they're not the events of the dream. It's just like when you become intelligent within a dream, when you come to consciousness, you realize the dream is going on and you have nothing to do with it. So similarly, in the waking state, when we become a little intelligent, we can realize that we're not the material body. Not only are we not the material body, we're not the material mind, because that's also another facet of this illusory energy. We have nothing to do with it. Even the intelligence, although the intelligence is sort of the aide de camp of the soul is still distinct from it. We're the witness of these three states of consciousness, passing through these three states of consciousness. They have nothing to do with it. So, it's described in the Upanishad, therefore this word comes turiya, literally meaning fourth, you see. So it's taken in two senses. Sometimes it's taken as witness, sometimes it's taken as the fourth state of consciousness, which mainly is how the Bhagavatam explains it. So this fourth state of consciousness, beyond waking, sleeping, and deep sleep. So there are different classifications of this. The pure state of consciousness is a general translation. You see Prabhupada translate this as in the Bhagavatam. And it's sometimes described in two different ways, just as liberation is described in two different ways. Generally, conventionally, we could say liberation is taken in a impersonal sense, meaning just merging into Brahman. But we understand that the highest form of liberation, sarupya, salokya, etc., like this, is having association with the Lord, having a form like the Lord, a personal liberation. So similarly, too, this word turiya, it implies a pure state of consciousness, meaning usually conventionally, especially in Upanishads, it refers to an impersonal state of consciousness, more or less just merging into Brahman. But it also refers to Krishna consciousness, and Srila Prabhu will explain like this. There is that state of impersonal consciousness, and it can't be denied, because it's just like Mayavadis, impersonalists, who attain liberation. They're not in waking, they're not in deep sleep, and they're not in dreaming. So what are they? And they must be in a transcendental state of consciousness. But that transcendental state of consciousness is not fully pure. It's just like, again, the example is given with this word turiya, and Srila Prabhupada will explain too, that he would liken clear consciousness to a dirty pond. After some time, when the pond sits, all the dirt settles to the bottom, and you can see things as they are very clearly. Now, the problem with this is like akin to impersonal liberation, because the problem is the dirt is still there on the bottom. And if it's agitated, all the dirt comes up, and again, the pond is muddied. So similarly, too, we understand yene ravindaksha vimuktamani as tvayasta bhavad avishuddha buddhiyaha. That liberation, impersonalists, they come to the point of liberation, they come to the state of turiya, but there's still dirt in their hearts. And at any moment, they can fall down from this transcendental state of consciousness. A better method than just having the dirt in the pond settle is to clear the dirt out altogether. Therefore, we just read this verse recently in the past chapter, translation. The sound incarnation of Krishna, the Supreme Soul, i.e. Srimad Bhagavatam, enters into the heart of a self-realized devotee, sits on the lotus flower of his loving relationship, and thus cleanses the dust of material associations, such as lust, anger, and hankering. Thus, it acts like autumnal rains upon pools of muddy water. So, a better method to see through, rather than just having the dirt in the pond settle, is better to flood the pond with heaps of pure water, and eventually all the contaminated mud will be gone from that pool. So, devotional service is like this. So this turiya, this fourth state of consciousness, it refers to Krishna consciousness. And that's living into his pure state. Just as Srila Prabhupada is explaining here in the purport again and again and again, the conditioned souls, the soul's actual nature is to be a servitor of the Lord in pure consciousness. This pure consciousness and to know oneself as servitor of the Lord, they're identical, in other words. When we understand ourselves to be servants of Krishna, then we're existing in our pure state. So yeah, these things are there. Also, it's taken to, there's one verse I wanted to mention. Prahlad Maharaj, he prays, Nyasyedam atmani jagat vilayambo madhya shishet mananija sukhanu bharvo nirihaha yogina milita durgatnam nipita nidras torye stito natu tamona gunamshta yungshe. So he says, torye stito, that Lord Vishnu, he's lying down on the causal ocean, and he's enjoying sleep, actually, nidra. He's enjoying mystic slumber. But his slumber is not is yoga nidra, it's not swapna. It's not the material state of consciousness, but it's a transcendental state of consciousness. So the living entity is originally in pure Krishna consciousness, situated in this fourth state of consciousness. And Lord Vishnu himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's always situated in this consciousness, even though he's also dreaming. Even his dreaming takes place in this transcendental state of consciousness. So the living entity, he's naturally in the state of consciousness, as I explained, and his natural state is to be Krishna consciousness, to recognize oneself as the servitor of the Lord. So it's possible that to be, we understand ourselves as servitors of the Lord. We have this philosophical understanding, but the realization is something different. And the realization comes in time with Krishna consciousness. As for the moment, even though we may understand theoretically all these things, I have nothing to do with this waking state of consciousness, with the sleeping state, with the deep sleep state. I have nothing to do with this body or mind. Still, this Atma Maya, just as a dream bewilders us, still we're bewildered by this very strong material energy in so many different ways. We accept the personality and character we manifest during this life to be ourselves. We identify with a nature that we have due to our body, in some cases, male, female, or in other cases, in terms of cultural conditioning, black, white, nationality, this and that. So this character and personality and nature we have now is the sum total of all of our experiences and desires in samsara, in this material existence. And we've come to this point. And also, not only the gross body, but also the subtle mind is molded based upon what we acquire from previous lives. Our mind thinks and acts in such a way because of we desire in such a way because of our past desires. And the gross body, it becomes formed based upon those desires. It's very simple to understand. Even in this life, it's just like if you desire something within the mind, and if you contemplate on it, eventually, one way or another, either in this life and the next, you'll get what you want in some form or another. It's just like if you want to, I don't know, if you want to learn a song and you're constantly thinking about the song, then chances are that you'll wind up actually spending time to learn that song or singing that song. If you want to learn an instrument, if you want to be a very good guitar player, you're thinking within yourself, I want to be a good guitar player. You have the strong material desire. Chances are the mind and senses will impel you to play guitar, to make yourself a nice guitar player. So in this way, our past desires shape our future existence and material existence. So that these desires, even though we've come to Krishna consciousness, still they have a very strong hold on us. Even though philosophically we understand we're not our body, we're not our mind, still necessarily almost we're forced to act according to the dictations of our body and mind in some situations. It's just like a woman, she has a particular nature. A man has a particular nature. An American has a particular nature. A German has a particular nature. And it's not that because they've come to Krishna consciousness, somebody's going to stop having the nature of a woman or stop having the nature of a man or stop having, etc. like this. Of course, Srila Prabhupada will explain that there's one conversation saying that my disciples, they're not Americans, they're not Europeans, they've given up all these designations. So the devotee, he gives up the designations, but the fact is we have to live with this material body and we have to live with this material mind, which is a condition in so many different ways. It's just Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that even one who's Vidvan, even a learned man, acts according to his own nature. And we see it with Arjuna. He wanted to give up everything and leave for the forest. He wanted to go to and just not take part in the fight, thinking it to be wrong. But Krishna was telling him, even if you do this, even if you give up the fight, your nature is to be a kshatriya. And by nature, it's natural for you. You'll feel impelled to engage in fighting. One way or another, you'll fight. You'll go to the forest, you may fight some tigers and bears. Or even if you go to the forest and you get word, say you get word and you hear that Maharaj Yudhishthira is surrounded and he needs help, it will be your nature to come back to the battlefield and help Yudhishthira Maharaj. You wouldn't neglect him in that way. So he could see that although Arjuna, he was expressing a desire to give up everything then and there against the desire of Krishna, Krishna could see that because it's your nature as a kshatriya to have this fighting propensity. So you may as well act on it and not act artificially, and so to say. So Srila Prabhupada will give many examples in this regards. It's just like he tells the story of one thief. He went on pilgrimage. So he was conditioned to steal things, this thief. He would steal things regularly. And then he was on pilgrimage with different people, other pilgrims, and they set up camp for the night. And the thief, in the middle of the night, he was feeling compelled to steal something because his nature is to be a thief. By profession, he's a thief. Formerly, the profession was there. The whole caste was there in India, although the British mainly killed most of them. They thought it would be a very good service to human society to do so. But anyway, but his nature, his profession was a thief, to be a thief. And so, but he was thinking that it's not right to steal when I'm on pilgrimage, when I'm executing a holy activity. So instead of stealing from all the other pilgrims, he simply took their things from their tents, took one man's thing and put it in another man's thing. And he did this to everyone. Everybody woke up in the morning and they saw all their possessions weren't there. They were saying, my bags and your tent, and this is there and this is there. And then the thief came forward and said, I did this, by nature is my nature to be to steal things, but I didn't want to steal things because I'm on pilgrimage, so I just moved things around a little bit. So the point is that we can't, this nature is there, and this nature has to be dealt with in Krishna consciousness. Of course, in the beginning, in Krishna consciousness, we come to Krishna consciousness. Well, there's different, there's different stages people usually go through. In the beginning, particularly for Westerners, because usually Westerners, they, at least people I know, the people in college, they give up everything with Krishna. Everything in the material world, their friends, their family, their education, their job, and they just dive into Krishna consciousness, and they hope to become a Paramahamsa overnight, leaving behind all material baggage. Krishna consciousness can get you there, but it's not as simple. It's just like this very nice Chinese man came recently, and he was saying, I want a very quick path. But unless you're Katvanga Maharaj, it's very difficult to have a very quick path in devotional service. Generally, it's a very gradual process. So, of course, in the beginning of devotional service, we're expected to engage in a variety of different services in terms of coming to the point of surrender. That's necessary, and also for the point of learning. Materially, one may not know how to cook at all, but it's necessary to learn how to cook in Krishna consciousness. We may not be a very outgoing person, but Srila Prabhupada wanted that all his disciples become trained to learn the art of distributing his books. So that spiritual principle is there. Srila Prabhupada said that a devotee means knowing a little bit of everything and is expert in one thing. So we should know all aspects of Krishna consciousness. But still, we have this body, we have this mind, and those natures are there. They can't be denied. So, and there's so many different examples in this regard. Just as Srila Prabhupada in his purport to Tata Paramahamsanam Muninam Amalatmanam in Queen Kunti's prayers, he writes that women, for example, are naturally inclined to be religious. So they very easily take up the path of devotion. They're very simple in their behavior. So these natures are there, and these natures have to be taken into consideration. Although it's not that, just like I was quoting this verse, even a learned man acts according to his own nature. Famously, this verse is misquoted, and to substantiate that, more or less the idea is, I have material desires. What can repression accomplish? Krishna says later in that verse. And people misquote this half of the verse. They don't quote the next one, that one superior is one who controls his mind and senses in all directions. That verse they don't quote, but they'll quote this. They'll take out of context this verse, and they'll explain in a way that's it's better to act according to my own nature and engage and indulge in material desires rather than trying to repress them. But that's not what Krishna is saying there in the Gita. It's not the process of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes we see, particularly brahmacharis, sometimes brahmacharis marry because they're feeling harassed by material desires. But it's not it's not unnatural for the conditioned soul to feel harassed by material desires, because everyone in the material world at every moment, unless you're a completely pure devotee, is harassed by material desires from the very beginning. It's not unusual. If we're struggling with material desires, the solution isn't to dive headfirst into them with a philosophy of what can repression accomplish. Rather, we should struggle. And actually, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that struggle is something. The fact that if we're struggling with material desires, that's something good, actually. Because if you look at everybody else in the world, they're not struggling with their material desires. They're just indulging headfirst into them. They're diving headfirst into them. And the result, they're completely full of anxiety. But one who tries to control his material desires, he attains peace. So yes, this point is there. So there's a difference between one's inherent nature, one's nature according to the body and the mind, and one having this philosophy of just indulging in material desires. But still, nevertheless, it's important that people should be in their right place and be given the right activity suited for them. It's just like if there's nobody in charge, if you're trying to appoint somebody to lead a temple and trying to appoint a leader or anything, whatever, and if they don't have the qualities to do it, it's not going to work. Of course, there's battlefield commission, and that's there, and Srila Prabhupada did that, but we can see in the long term, if somebody, if somebody has no organizational skills, they have no financial responsibility, and you give them the position of a temple president, what will happen? Of course, Krishna's mercy is there, but it's natural. They can attend a leadership seminar, they can attend 200 leadership seminars, but if by nature somebody doesn't have the capacity to be a leader, you can't force them into such a role. It's just like if you have a donkey, you can't turn that donkey into a racehorse, right? Even among horses, among breeds of horses, there's different breeds of horses. There's work horses, which I don't know if they're still around anymore. Traditionally, at least in Europe, they were used to plow fields. And there's race horses. And the two have very distinct roles. So similarly, people have very distinct mentalities, and it's best to use a racehorse as a racehorse and not to use it as a beast of burden. And that way, its abilities are utilized to the fullest. So similarly, too, devotees have different natures and propensities. And while a devotee should be able to do everything in a surrendered spirit, it's best for the devotee and also the Krishna consciousness movement as a whole that the devotee engage his own abilities and what comes natural to him. It's just as Srila Prabhupada, he engaged one disciple, Damodar Goswami. He was a bachelor, he got his PhD in organic chemistry. So Srila Prabhupada didn't demand that he just completely change everything. Of course, he shaved his head and moved into a temple, etc. But Srila Prabhupada utilized Swarup Damodar Goswami's ability as a scientist in preaching Krishna consciousness. And presumably, Srila Prabhupada wouldn't, the scientific preaching of the movement wouldn't have gone so far if Swarup Damodar Goswami was engaged in, say, cooking for the deities, for example, although he may have been competent to do so. So because he was able in some area, and because he was engaged in that area appropriately, he was able to render immense service. So similarly, too, we see Jadharani Mataji. She was already an artist before coming to Krishna consciousness. To some degree, I believe, maybe not on the grand scale, but she was drawing or something like that. And Srila Prabhupada engaged her. So similarly to Satsvarup Damodar Goswami, Satsvarup Goswami, he was already an author before coming to Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada saw that he utilized his ability. And, we see the immense work that he's done for Srila Prabhupada's movement. He wrote that book, Greetings of Vedic Literature. He wrote one other book, I think, in Prabhupada's time. And he was the editor for Back to God, did something for 30 years, keeping it going. So, say what? Yeah, he wrote Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita as well as so many other books he's written. He writes prolifically. So we can see that the service he's been able to do based upon his natural ability. Srila Prabhupada, he would say, coming to Krishna consciousness, it's best not, it's not that you have to learn anything new. Especially for most people who come at a late age, it doesn't make sense to learn much new. It's just like when some of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, they were asking about learning Sanskrit. He discouraged them, saying you're already, a fourth of your life is already over, maybe a third of it. Why waste this time learning a skill you have no prior training into? Just use what you already have to serve Krishna, because that's the ultimate point. Not any degree of scholarliness, not any this or that, but the point is to serve Krishna. To serve Krishna, the nicer we can serve Krishna, the nicer we can push on the Krishna consciousness movement. To that degree, that service is valuable. And as I was mentioning, some people aren't suited for certain roles, and they can't be forced into certain roles. My spiritual master, he tells the story of one of his godbrothers who, in his words, I'm just repeating, had a very strong Vaishya mentality. He would travel around and he would buy things in one country, and when he would get to the other country, he would sell them at a profit. It's just like, if I go from here to India and I bring like a bunch of electronics from America, I can sell them for very expensively. Similarly, too, if I come from India with some foreign, whatever, I don't know what people buy. If some rug, say tapestry, Persian rug from India. In India, you can get it very cheap. But America costs thousands of dollars. So he was doing like this, going from one, had a very strong, and the temple he was over, he was engaged in different money-making schemes and like that. So this devotee, my spiritual master, God brother, he took sannyas, and he carried this mentality into sannyas, and eventually, I'll gloss over the story. He fell down from sannyas, and my spiritual master relates that probably one reason is because his mentality wasn't suited for sannyas. Sannyas is generally, conventionally, of course, we understand that everybody except Shudras, they may accept, but generally, it's meant for people of more Brahminical behavior. Those who, because Brahmanas, a qualification of sannyas is to be Goswami, to control one's senses. A Brahmana, a quality of a Brahmana is that he has already controlled his senses. So it's very natural for a Brahmana to become a sannyasi. Whereas a Vaishya, who's very much, of course this devotee was a Vaishya, but he had that sort of mentality, that money-making mentality. And sannyas necessitates renunciation. So it wasn't necessary. So that ashram wasn't necessarily suited for him. Of course, this devotee continued on with the Krishna consciousness and was doing good, but he wasn't correctly engaged according to his own nature. So we have to understand our nature and act within it, and we also have to understand others' natures and act within it. It's particularly for preaching. We have to understand the current environment in which we're preaching. It's just like Srila Prabhupada came to the West in 1965, and he spent almost a year, I believe 8 months or something, he was doing some preaching activities, but particularly in the beginning, he was more or less studying the people of America, just their culture, their mannerisms, their nature, so to say, in succinct, how they act, how they deal, how they think, their worldview, etc., like this, because different people think differently. And Srila Prabhupada preached according to the circumstances he was in. So there's our own nature, just like a man has a certain nature to be very dominant. A woman has a nature to be very submissive, among other things. So these are natures according to the body. But there's also natures according to the mind. Just like different nationalities, different national considerations. For example, somebody born in India, they have a very high, they're more likely to take up the process of Krishna consciousness, not because they have an Indian body, but because they have some semblance of Vedic culture. So based upon one's cultural conditioning, it's also a factor in not taking up Krishna consciousness, among other things. It's just like, therefore, like Chaitanya, he said, Bharata Bhumite Haila, Manisha Janmajar, Janmasartaka Kori Para Upakara. That one who has taken his birth in the land apart, he should perfect his life and make others' life perfect. Why? Because he has the opportunity of being associated with Vedic culture. Consequently, on the flip side, we see second, third generation Indians born in America. The only difference between them and the natural born Americans is just the color of their skin, more or less. Otherwise, we see they're as adverse to Krishna consciousness as any other karmi in America, any other Westerner. So there's cultural conditioning. In different cultures, they have different conditionings. It's just like, you have experience in South America. Generally, my limited experience with South Americans is that they're generally very emotional at times. They're very sensual in some ways. So Americans have a particular mentality. Canadians have a particular mentality. Germans have a particular mentality. It's just like Manidhara Prabhu, who is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, very prominent in Europe, at least among some temples there. He travels around Germany and the Slavic countries, and he still emphasizes book distribution. But he says, particularly in Germany, that Germans, he himself is German, so he likes to rag on Germans. Germans are very staunch, organized, very systematic, serious people. And so when they take up Krishna consciousness, they generally do so, they take it up for good, usually. They stick with it, and they take it very seriously. So similar to French people are also like that. Whereas we see with Filipino people, Filipinos, they tend to take up Krishna consciousness very easily, but they'll also go away very easily. So different cultural conditionings can affect things. It's just, so too, Srila Prabhupada said Russians would make first-class theists because they have that sort of cultural conditioning. Russians, Ukrainians, Czechs, although Czechs, I don't know, nowadays they're mostly atheistic. So these different cultural considerations are also there. We see that Catholics generally take up Krishna consciousness very easily because it fits within their cultural conditioning. Within the Catholic Church, we see this. They have conception of one God. They worship demigods, which they call saints, more or less. Is more or less demigod worship. They have festive holidays. There's a sense of community in the church. There's constantly festivals throughout the year. When I was in England, they told me something like, actually, there's almost, if you look at the Catholic calendar, you could take every day as a holiday or as a festival. Holiday meaning in the traditional, as a festival day. They just don't celebrate it like that because there's so many different saints, so many different et ceteras, or have had their birthday, et cetera, like that. So somebody who's grown up in such a culture, they can very easily take to Krishna consciousness. Whereas somebody who's grown up in a culture that's averse to Krishna consciousness, say just like we meet many Muslims. For those who have grown up in a Muslim background, it's very, very difficult to even if they're not a very staunch Muslim, but because they have this idea embedded in them that God, they can't understand. They think it's blasphemous, actually, that to call God a person is very, very difficult for people coming from a Muslim background to take up Krishna consciousness. It's very, very difficult because they can't accommodate a personal conception of the divine. So similarly, Thai people, my spiritual master relates, he preached in Thailand for some time. In Thai language, there's no word for God. There's words for gods in the sense of demigods. They have their regional equivalents of Indra, of Agni. They even have a word for Krishna, actually. But they consider all these things to be minor gods. They don't have an idea. There's no conception within their language, their culture, of one supreme God who's controlling everything, as we find in the Abrahamic religions, for instance, or even within the Vedic tradition. So for people who's coming from such a background, it can be very difficult for them to take up Krishna consciousness. So many things are there. So Srila Prabhupada, he was, of course, still these cultural considerations are there, and these cultural considerations have an effect. My point is, an effect of our Krishna consciousness, even if we may not be consciously aware of it. It's just like we see many people, particularly for the Western countries, is very prominent, have issues. They may say it, they may not say it, but with certain statements of Srila Prabhupada. They may be this. Srila Prabhupada, in many ways, he went against the grain of Western society and made many statements that would, if he made it today, if a journalist caught hold of it today, it would be very shocking for some people. Srila Prabhupada, even during the 1970s, which was prominent, there was something like the third feminist wave or something there. Srila Prabhupada was openly against feminism. He was openly against democracy. In fact, he advocated dictatorship. Now, in dictatorship in the form of monarchy, for those of us from a West, at least America, I know, this word dictator, it's almost like, how to say it? Say what? It's almost like a trigger. What's the word for like? It's almost like a profanity. Just like I happened to see on the news that the president of our country called the president of another country a dictator, which he was. The president of the other country he's flatly a dictator if you look at the definition of the word. But according to our cultural our conditioning, this word is almost like a cuss word or something like that. So, but Srila Prabhupada, he openly writes in the Bhagavatam, dictatorship is the best form of government. So some people may have a problem with it. Some people may have a problem with Srila Prabhupada advocating different roles between men and women. They may have a problem with Srila Prabhupada restricting sexual indulgence, this and that, based upon one's cultural conditioning is the point I'm making. We don't see, for example, many people coming out of India or Arabic countries protesting Srila Prabhupada's, different treatment, or not treatment, but emphasis of gender roles amongst his disciples. Rather, mainly is an idea coming out of the Western countries. Why? Because of their cultural conditioning. So we have to act based upon, we have to take into consideration our conditioning and our nature, but at the same time, our conditioning, our nature is not something that we can adjust the philosophy to, or something we can adjust the statements of the spiritual master to, or adjust the desire of the spiritual master to. Rather, everything is taken in that light. It's not that, as I was saying previously, it's not that because even though one may not be a very good, very outgoing social person, he doesn't distribute books. It's not that because so many different things are there. It's not that because one is not a very good cook. If you need to cook, he doesn't cook. You have to cook in Krishna consciousness. You at least must take prasadam. So, like this. So these things are there. These different cultural considerations are there between so many different things. Americans have a different nature. Indians have a different nature. One English poet, he prominently wrote, "The East is East." My spiritual master, he quotes, "East is East, West is West, and never shall the two meet." Parodying, more or less highlighting the differences between the British who were there in India and the native Indians there in India. How different of a nature they were. He said something like, "The Christian riles while the Aryan smiles," and basically the white man riles while the brown man smiles, because the brown man, the Indian, they're very lax. They don't do things according to a time frame very much, for those of us who have some limited experience. And if you're invited to some event held by an Indian body person, and it takes place at 5 o'clock, that could mean it could take place at 6 o'clock, or 7 o'clock, or even 8 o'clock. So whereas English people, they're very productive, very industrious. Everything runs very nicely. We see when the British came to India, they set up nice railroads with time schedules, time frames, organized everything very nicely. But the ethos didn't fit in with Indian culture. So this poet, he says, later in that poem, something like, here lies the fool who tried to hurry the East. So these cultural considerations are there, and these things don't go away, is the point I'm making, that when we come to Krishna consciousness. It's not that when we come to Krishna consciousness, we're going to give up our Indian accent, our Indian nature, or this and that. It's not that we're going to give up our American accent, become an expert orator of Sanskrit literature, and become very expert, immediately overnight cultured and learned in Vedic culture. And it's not that we're going to give up these conceptions. And it's important to recognize this in devotional service in terms of accommodating our own ability to serve Krishna, what we can do best for Krishna, and recognizing our limitations. Where in terms of what holds us back in devotional service and what could be overcome, how we could better serve Krishna. For example, that misconception was there and is still there that Indian culture, Vedic culture actually, is inferior to Western culture, coming famously from the British. And so it's easy to think in Krishna consciousness that we're being taught some aspect of culture, just like there's this, we wash our hands after eating or after touching something contaminated, where it's very easy to write it off and think this is just some Hindu superstition or some Hindu ritual, when it's actually an aspect of culture that the acharyas practiced, that Krishna encouraged. So we shouldn't let this conditioning inhibit us in our Krishna consciousness. At the same time, we have to act according to it. So, I'm going to end my class there. I'm going to take any questions or comments anybody has on this, if anything. Yeah, Jitta?
I have a how-to question for you.
Yeah.
How do we know what our nature is?
Question. Yeah, go on.
How do we recognize our nature? How can we tell what our nature is?
As with another stereotyped answer is to be in good association. Because actually it's pointed out. It's not just a stereotyped answer, it's pointed out. And if we have a little introspection, usually what happens, at least for me, what happens is somebody points it out, and my nature is to say, oh, no, you're wrong. You're just being arrogant. But if you contemplate on it, then you realize that the other person may have some sense. They may be actually trying to help you in some way, and that way you can see. Because otherwise, we're conditioned. It's just like if somebody's... it takes somebody that is free from conditioning to point out conditioning. In other words, it's just like if somebody, just like we went to, we visited Czech Republic. I could see the lifestyle in Czech Republic. People suffer very hard there. They suffer so much and they work so hard. But if you look at everybody, it doesn't seem like they're conscious of it. Why? Because they're conditioned to. They take life in general as something, as if it's just something. Life means struggle, more or less. That's their mindset. And so coming from a more, I guess you could say, affluent country, I could recognize these people are struggling like anything, whereas they couldn't see it. So that's a mundane example, but it takes somebody who doesn't have our conditioning to point that out. It's just like another American, for instance. They may not point out that we're not following for certain aspects of Vedic culture. For instance, it may take an Indian to point that out. Indian body person, Indian body devotee. Amongst other things, it's not just cultural considerations, there's also devotional considerations like that. But yeah, in essence, that's that.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. And a quick question. So you said this term, there's 4 states of consciousness.
Yeah.
2 states of dreaming, deep sleep, and sleeping. So svapna, you said, refers to dreaming sleep, correct?
Swapna is dreaming sleep, yeah.
And then turiya is the 4th state,
Turiya,
transcendental consciousness.
There's different verses I was going to quote in the 11th canto, but the thing is, the 11th canto becomes like very technical, and it's become very dense. So let me see. Jagrata, that's one word. Jagaranam, being awake. Swapne, in a sleep. And then deep sleep. Anyway, I can find it if you give me time. But what was your question? Is that your?
Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering
Sorry,
the terminology.
It's different. Krishna says it again. It comes throughout the Uddhava Gita. 11:13. I think it's also mentioned in 11:21. Those are 2 chapters I know. Okay. I have it here. I'll just pull it. It's not the technical Sanskrit, particularly nicely in one verse, so I can't give you the technical terms. But this is one of the Yogendras speaking, I think. I don't think this is from the Uddhava Gita, but no, this is Krishna speaking, I'm sorry, to Uddhava. So a person who has thus achieved me, is somebody still on here? I can just broadcast it, that way it can be nicely. This is Krishna speaking. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both the material mind and his objects. Waking, sleeping, and deep sleep are the 3 functions of the intelligence and are caused by the modes of material nature. The living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from these 3 states, and thus remains as a witness to them. And I think here, no, the next verse or verse after that. The spiritual soul is trapped within and the bondage of material intelligence, which awards him constant engagement in the illusory modes of nature. But I am the 4th state of consciousness. Krishna identifies himself with the 4th state here. Beyond wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material mind. So you see that the word turiya in the 4th element, beyond wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. This is 11:13:28. The whole section you can read if you want to know more. These terms, particularly this wakefulness, dreaming, deep sleep, and turiya, is mentioned many times in the Upanishads, and mainly it's described in an impersonal way. You'll find Mayavadis that actually like to talk about this very much. Turiya state of consciousness, they emphasize this a lot actually. So particularly Mayavadis in terms of meaning like Shankaracharya, he emphasizes there. Those who follow that, his philosophy. So there's something else. Charandeep had something.
So there is, so in the verse, in the purport actually, Prabhupada says, As Paramatma, Krishna gives memory, knowledge,
Yeah.
forgetfulness.
It's 15, yeah.
Yeah, Sarvasacham Hridasannivishto. And then, because of Paramatma, living entities are conscious.
Yeah.
Without Paramatma, living entities are not conscious. Is it fair to say?
Yeah.
And then there is also the Swadharma, which someone takes on because of the influence of the modes of material nature.
Yeah.
Uh, I was just wondering.
Swabhava is a more
Swabhava.
Swabhava is a more like accurate word than Swadharma. Swadharma is also there. That's also there in the Bhagavad Gita. But Swabhava is a little more like accurate, I guess you could say. And if you're explaining on like the characteristics and like that. But anyway, yeah. So
Yeah. Okay, Swabhava. So, how are these two related? Are they two related or?
Paramatma and one's Swadharma, Swabhava.
Yeah.
Well, it's given by Krishna. Krishna, he Paramatma, he oversees the material manifestation. Indirectly, he sees that things are going on. He's given that sort of duty by Krishna, so he expands himself with that intention. And so Paramatma, he dishes out karma. Of course, not directly, it's all indirect through the agency of the material energy. But how are they related? They're related in the sense that ultimately Paramatma is dictating everything that's going on. One has a particular nature. One has, for instance, a Brahminical nature because he had a desire to do it in a previous life. Maybe somebody wanted to be very scholarly. Maybe somebody wanted to be a Brahmana. Maybe somebody wanted to fight. So Paramatma, seeing that desire of that conditioned soul, he puts him into such a situation. Sometimes in a human body, sometimes it's just like if somebody wants to fight, they can very easily fight in the form of a tiger, right? So Paramatma also fulfills that desire in that, maybe in a different way, but that's how it's related, principally. Does that satisfy you? You look unsatisfied.
No, that's satisfied. But in the follow-up is we have to utilize our nature, internal nature,
Yeah.
to serve Krishna.
Yeah.
So that is also, it's also dictated by Paramatma, or
That's already there. That's dictated by Paramatma. So why do we have that nature? Because we have material desires. That's the point I'm making. Otherwise, if we didn't have material desires to begin with, we would completely be on the platform of pure servitors of Krishna. It doesn't matter what my nature, we wouldn't have a nature. Pure devotees, they don't have a nature, material nature, because they don't have a material body. But Srila Prabhupada, he would use these words, making the best use of a bad bargain. So we have this material body, we have this nature because of whatever nonsense, whatever desires we've had in the past life. And so we've come to Krishna consciousness. Paramatma has kindly given this to us. And so we have a chance to utilize whatever we have in Krishna consciousness. So sometimes Krishna blesses people with different propensities. Just like some people, they have very sweet voices. And Krishna has given them a very nice ability to sing. Some people, materially speaking, they have a very sharp intelligence. They're able to remember things very nicely. So Krishna has blessed them in that way, that he's given them. Of course, that may have been a result of some material desire, but because they've come to Krishna consciousness, it's a blessing. They're able to transform it into something practical rather than just another fulfillment of material desire in the ocean of samsara. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, anything from then? No? You have something?
I was talking with a devotee about this, but I was saying, obviously some people seem more favorable due to their, like you said, their natures.
100%. Yeah.
Right. But then
100%, yeah.
and then you say that's like due to their karma, and then it seems like you don't want to say Krishna consciousness and karma, like it's dependent.
Necessarily because we see, just like I was saying, some people from Muslim backgrounds, it's difficult for them to take, but it's not that people don't. We have Muslim devotee, Haridas Thakur himself, of course, he's a pure devotee, he's giving an example, but we have so many devotees within from Muslim background. But anyway, you want to finish your point and then I can.
Well, that was one part. Another part was just did Srila Prabhupada ever encourage like gearing preaching efforts, book distribution towards a more favorable crowd or more. I see like he like
he did that.
I see like in India he like went back and he knew there was like a culture, as like a safety net kind of thing.
Well, he went back. Different things. First thing, it's so having a material qualification helps you pick up the consciousness. No, not necessarily. Because we see some people they have the same material qualification. It's just like one Muslim may take the book and another Muslim may not. Sometimes we see Muslims who are very staunch in their faith, still they take a book somehow. They're very bewildering. It doesn't make sense. Other Muslims are some people who are at the same time you'll meet people who seem to be very, very spiritual. They seem to be very much into the books, and they don't take a book. So it's not. Of course, it can create a favorable circumstance, and some people are more favorable than others. But it's not strictly dependent upon material conditions. Although that's certainly a factor. It's certainly easier to get, like I was saying, Indians who have the culture to take up Krishna consciousness. Because something is there in their past, like usually people take the Krishna consciousness not because of something, not because or they don't because of material nature, but rather it's because of some devotional service in the past, rather than they were previously practicing or some unknown pious credit. So second thing, you were asking did Srila Prabhupada encourage that? I'll say he did that himself because he came to America with the intention to preach to the wealthy, elevated class of men, upper class of men. They were taking. He went to Dr. Mishra's ashram, and it was just a bunch of old widows who were going there, basically, and they weren't taking anything seriously. And you could see he's not. You can't reach these people. But he preached to the hippies. He completely changed his tactics. Actually, in this book, Moon and Mission, there's a section that deals with Srila Prabhupada changing his preaching style because he realized that the hippies were taking up they're our best customers, he said. It's not that they're particularly spiritually inclined. A little bit something was there, but there were more material frustration was there. So they would easily take the Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada, he himself did that. Another point, you're saying moving back to India and the safety net and things. I don't fully understand that, but one thing is that during Srila Prabhupada's time in India, it was very difficult to preach in. It wasn't like it is today. Things have changed a lot nowadays. Now it's more difficult to preach in the West than India, whereas back in Prabhupada's era, it was easier to preach in the West than it was to preach in India. And preaching in India is very difficult because people had these Mayavadi conceptions. They still do, but it was as if the generic understanding of Bhagavad Gita in those days was just the impersonal understanding more or less. And, Indians, they had this nature to be very convinced. And especially when it comes to like what they know about, if they have some knowledge of Shastra or anything like that, they think themselves to be completely right. And so they'll quote a verse from the Bhagavad Gita to completely misunderstand the thing. Just like they quote this verse famously. They quote this verse saying that basically, work and perform your duty. It's better to perform your own duty rather than, and then they completely misquote it and take it out of context. So anyway, just touching on that point. But your essential question that material qualification, no, and then Srila Prabhupada himself did that. We do that. It's better to preach to people who give books to people. Go somewhere favorable for books. It's better to go to, Little 5 Points. I don't really have much of a modern conception where we distribute books now. But Little 5 Points is definitely more favorable than distributing books outside of a nursing home. For example, some places and some people or some atmospheres are more favorable than others. So yeah. Is it okay? Right. Anything for the woman? Yes, there's two. Yeah, basically. Present day, yeah.
What is the difference between the subtle body and the mind?
Subtle body is the mind. I'm sorry if I made a distinction unknowingly, but the subtle body also includes intelligence. That's the thing. It's not just the mind.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
When it comes to dreams, like sometimes people will interpret it or say that they're visions. So what actually is the dreaming?
What
state?
actually is the dreaming? Or is the modes of material, is the hallucinations of the mind is what it is. It's just the activity of the mind based upon past impressions. You see, I think in the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, the example is given, it's just like you will have a dream. Example is given, a dream of a golden mountain. So no such thing exists as a golden mountain. It's something illusory, it's a hallucination actually. But because you have past experience of something that is gold, and you have a past experience of a mountain, the two combine together in a dream, and you have these illusion like this. So dreams go on like that based upon our past impressions within the mind, especially. I've heard our spiritual masters say that especially dreams, material desires, for devotees, sometimes it's that material desires or material impressions, they come about in the mind and they're resolved, they come about in dreams and they're resolved in dreams. And that way they don't manifest in the gross state of existence because they're still subtly there in the mind. And so this way they resolve themselves. It's just like, there may be so many less desires within the mind during dreams. During the gross state, it may not be so intense, but because they're subtly there in the mind, because those strong impressions are there in the mind, they come out in dreams. So effectively, dreams are these impressions within the mind coming out like that. It can also be visions. Just as Srila Prabhupada, he had 3 times a dream of his spiritual master beckoning him to take sannyas. And the first time he didn't really assign much importance of it. Second time, third time especially, that when it happened the 3rd time, he took it that my spiritual master is calling me to take sannyas. So we have to see what the dream is, what the contents of the dream is. Does it line up? Is it something my spiritual master won't? Does it line up with what he's saying, with what he is saying? Or sometimes you can have a dream of your spiritual master and just be all nonsense taking place in the dream. It's possible, actually. Some people, they have dreams of Srila Prabhupada telling them so many crazy things. And it's true. They have dreams of Srila Prabhupada telling them, like, actually, you should become a Bhajananandi. And, so many different things like this, among other crazy things. And they take it as pramana, as an evidence, not only for themselves, but for others as well. So it has to be seen. It can be visions, and it can be like that. The spiritual master is present. Srila Prabhupada also said in relation with dreams, if you have dreams of Krishna or the spiritual master, that is very nice. So that's my knowledge of dreams. Is that okay?
And does it say anywhere what Mahavishnu is dreaming when he's in
Mahavishnu is
Narakamala?
dreaming. Yeah, there's this verse I just quoted on Yasyedam Atmani. Let me see. It comes throughout the Bhagavatam actually, but just give me 1 second. I can pull it up on the screen. This comes in Prahlad Maharaj's prayers distinctly. I think it also is mentioned in the, it's definitely mentioned somewhere in the 2nd canto. 5th canto is mentioned as well. This is the verse I was quoting, Nyasyedam. And then it says, this is Prahlad Maharaj praying, "My Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, after the annihilation of the creative energy is kept in you, who appear to sleep with half-closed eyes. Actually, however, you do not sleep like an ordinary human being, for you are always in a transcendental stage, beyond the creation of the material world. You always feel transcendental bliss. As Karna Dokashayi Vishnu, you thus remain in your transcendental status, although not touching material objects. Although you appear to sleep, this sleeping is distinct from sleeping in ignorance." And it quotes from the Brahma Samhita as well, which is also relevant. "I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who lies down the casual ocean. In his plenary portion of Mahavishnu, with all the universe is generating from the pores of the hairs on his transcendental body, and who accepts the mystic slumber of eternity." So the purport of this, it talks about this, and the purport to that verse in the Brahma Samhita, it also talks about that. But the dreams of Mahavishnu is not, The dreams of Mahavishnu are reality. That's the difference. Our dreams are an illusion. Mahavishnu's dreams become a reality. His dreams it's this from him and his dreaming and his sleeping state, his dreaming state. All these material universes, they come out and they're manifesting like that. So, okay, that's okay. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.